Okay, so this is your part two of the command pattern. We're going to look at the class diagram for this pattern. Okay, so let's just start with the first part, which is normally just the one that provides us context to what our example we're working with. Now the client, what it does is just the consumer of classes of the command design pattern. So this is now going to create the command objects and link these to your receiver. So you're going to see that the actual command interface is here, and then this command interface is obviously now going to have a number of command objects that should be executed by your invoker. So this is now the client in your command pattern. So you're going to look at the various classes of the command pattern and see how these work. So just a little background on what we have been speaking about. So this is your invoker. This is your command base, which can, depending on what you're working with, can either be an abstract class or an interface with the execute method there, which is responsible for executing the commands. And then this is your ConcreteCommand. So you can, as you see, you can have a number of concrete commands, which obviously inherit from your CommandBase interface or actual class, depending on whatever you're working with. And then this is your receiver, which is responsible for executing the actions for your commands. And this can actually, as you said, that this can now parameterize the actions from your command. Okay, let us look at now the receiver. Okay, so the receiver now is, let me just take a highlighter. So the receiver over here is the object that contains the method that are executed when one or more commands are invoked. So this is now the class that knows how to perform the work or how to carry out the request from the command over here. Okay, so this allows the actual functionality to be held separately to the command definitions. Let us now look at our command base. So the command base over here, it says here this is an abstract class, which is a base class for all commands. So yes, it's an abstract class. Like I've said, if you want to use this, you want to use an interface, you can, depending on whatever example or context that you're working in. So this declares an interface for all commands, as you already know that a command is invoked through the execute method over here. So this method is, if you're using an abstract class, it's going to be abstract, but if you're now using an interface, this method should be implemented over here in the concrete class. So it also defines a concrete field, a private field, that holds the receiver that is linked to the command. So if, for example, you've got a number of receivers and you've got a number of commands, so now the receiver that has to carry out a command that has to pass through the constructor over here. Okay, so as I've said that it has this execute method that is used by the invoker to execute commands. Okay. Okay, so let us look at the ConcreteCommand. It's obvious that this class can inherit from the command base. It's a type class, so you can have a number of commands. So if you want to implement this, if you want to use this, you obviously need to specify whatever this command is responsible for in the execute method. So if you want to now call this execute method, you have to do that through the invoker. So, so this is now going to define a binding between the action and the receiver. So the invoker makes a request by calling the execute method, and the concrete command carries it by calling one or more actions in the receiver. So now that it does through this constructor over here, which is called, or this method can be called now in the execute command in your invoker class. Now lastly, let us look at the invoker class or object. So this initiates the execution of commands. So this holds a command at some point, and then it asks the command to carry out a request by calling its execute method. So the invoker could be controlled by the client over here. So whatever the client says that the invoker should do, then that. But sometimes, I mean, the invoker can be disconnected from the client. Now that means that now the client could just create a queue which can be executed or execute the queue of commands periodically, which means that you can just call a list and say after some time, please just carry out this command. Okay, so that's the class diagram that I wanted to share with you. So now we're going to look at the code, and then after looking at the code, we're going to look at the example so that we can just make the example a little bit clearer. And then what you're going to do is I'm going to send out your prac, which you're going to obviously explain in your class, in your Zoom session next week. Okay, thank you. That was just an explanation of the class diagram. So now I'm going to present the code snippet to you for the classes that you just worked on.